China just pulled the cover off a new wave of transportation. That looks less like next year's models than the next century's. An SUV that spins in place and floats out of a flooded street. A driverless train gliding above rush hour traffic on a single rail, built in 7 months. Passenger drones flying with nobody at the controls, and cars that lift off the road entirely. None of it is a concept sketch. It is real, moving now and arriving faster than anyone expected. And across the United States, the people who build the future are watching and starting to look over their shoulder. BYD Yangwang U8. Let me start with the machine that had people accusing the footage of being fake. The BYD Yangwang U8 is a big luxury off-roader, and the first thing it does is refuse to move like a car. Sitting completely still, it spins a full 360 degrees on the spot, because each wheel is driven independently and can turn against the others, pivoting the whole body like it is balanced on a coin. Car people call it a tank turn. Everyone else calls it impossible. Then it does the thing that really breaks brains. It floats. The U8 rides on a hydraulic system that lifts or drops the whole body by around 150 millimeters, letting it hunker down over rough ground or heave itself up over an obstacle. And if it ever gets caught in a flood, an emergency floating mode takes over on its own. The engine cuts out, the body seals itself, and it stays buoyant for up to around 30 minutes, paddling forward at a slow walking pace to carry whoever is inside to dry ground. The base version can wade through water about a meter deep, and the tougher off-road version handles more than that. Imagine the storm that traps a normal car and drowns its electronics in 10 seconds. And now, imagine the vehicle inside it calmly turning into a boat. BYD is blunt about the limits. This is a lifeboat, not a jet ski. Use the floating mode and the suspension has to be checked and serviced afterward. So nobody should be treating a lake like a swimming pool. But sit with it for a second. This is a premium flagship, not some duct-taped experiment. And it treats a flooded road as a mildly annoying detour instead of a nightmare. And here is what ties all of it together. The spin, the lift, the float, none of it comes from bolting on gimmicks. It all falls out of one decision, which is that every wheel gets its own motor and its own brain. Give a vehicle that much command over each corner of itself, and it stops behaving like a car and starts behaving like something smarter than the road it is on. That is the kind of thing that makes a rival engineer go very quiet. And the ground, it turns out, was the least ambitious place China decided to start. Sky Train. Because the next machine leaves the street behind completely. Picture a commuter on a Tuesday morning, coffee in one hand, stepping onto a train that has no driver and never touches the road at all. It hangs from a single elevated rail and slides above the traffic while everyone stuck below just watches it pass. The line runs about 10.5 kilometers. It moves at roughly 60 kilometers an hour and carries up to 200 people at a time, doing the exact job of an ordinary train while floating over the chaos instead of shoving through it. Here is the number that should keep transit planners up at night. The whole thing went up in about 7 months. That is roughly what it takes to lay plain track on the ground, except this version moves more people, causes fewer accidents, and costs about the same to build. And lifting it into the air gives something back. The streets underneath stay open, and the skinny supports leave room for parks and roads and everything else a packed city is starving for. For that commuter, it is simply a faster ride to work. A smooth glide over the same jam that used to eat 20 minutes of the morning. For the city, it is a whole second layer of transportation, stacked on top of the first, without bulldozing a single block, or shutting a single road for years. It is less a gadget than a template, and it is one a lot of American cities, still arguing over transit projects that will not open for a decade, cannot match right now. But the SkyTrain still needs a rail. The next machine doesn't need anything under it at all. Quick thing before we get to it. If these machines are pulling you in, take 1 second to subscribe, because this channel breaks down the tech reshaping how the world moves before most people have even heard the names. And you really do not want to be the last to find out. Now, back to it. Ahong 216S. That machine that needs nothing under it? This is it. The Ahong 216S is a Chinese-built passenger drone, and it does exactly what those two words promise. It carries people through the air with no pilot anywhere inside it. It runs on 8 pairs of electric rotors and seats 2 passengers, built for short hops across a city. It is quiet, it burns nothing, and it handles takeoff, the whole flight, and landing entirely on its own with no human touching a single control. Think about what that deletes. No pilot to train, no license to earn, no stick to wrestle, no white-knuckle moment where a nervous first-timer suddenly has to fly. You pick a destination and become a passenger in the purest sense, free to just watch the city slide by underneath you. And the safety design is the part that turns a stunt into something you might actually trust. Even if one of its rotors fails in mid-air, the aircraft is built to keep flying and set itself down safely. So a single broken part is not a catastrophe, just a landing. It cruises at up to 130 kilometers an hour and can climb to around 3,000 meters, more than enough to lift clean over the exact gridlock that swallows an hour of everyone's day. Hold on to this line because it is the whole point of everything you are watching. A concept car is a promise. A vehicle you can buy, wade through a flood-in, or actually climb aboard is a fact. The E-Hang is not a rendering spinning on a screen at a trade show. It is a real aircraft that lifts off with real people sitting inside it, and that gap between the thing that might happen someday and the thing already happening is the whole reason America is watching this so closely. So what happens when China points that same engineering nerve back at an ordinary family sedan? NIO ET9. You get a car that behaves like it has a nervous system. The NIO ET9 is the company's flagship, and it made its case with one ridiculous, unforgettable move. It shakes the snow off its own roof. Using its fully active suspension, the whole car rocks side to side on command and flings the snow off itself, the way a wet dog shakes off water. No brush, no owner, no effort at all. Just make sure nothing loose is sitting in the cabin first, or your coffee is about to repaint the interior. The party trick is hiding the serious part. The ET9 is a large luxury flagship built on an advanced high-voltage architecture, which is the engineering that lets it pour a huge amount of range back in at the right charger in minutes, instead of the long waits people still expect from electric cars. It sits near the top of NIO's lineup on price, aimed squarely at the buyer who wants to pull up somewhere and be noticed. But look past the snow gag and you see what the suspension is really saying. A car that can shrug snow off its own roof is a car that can read the road surface and rewrite its own ride hundreds of times a second, softening a pothole before you feel it, flattening a corner before it throws you. The snow trick gets the clicks. The suspension and the charging tech buried underneath it are the actual flex. And once a car can throw its own body around like that, the next question writes itself. Why keep it on the road at all? GAC Gove. At its own tech day, the Chinese automaker GAC answered exactly that by pulling the cover off the Gove, and it is worth saying plainly how far-fetched this idea used to be. For 100 years, the flying car was the punchline, the thing that was always 20 years away. The Gove is the flying car cartoon, finally built. It is a single-passenger capsule that sits on a 4-wheeled base, and the two halves come apart. The bottom is a wheeled platform that drives through the city like an ordinary electric car. The top is a detachable drone with 6 folding blades that lift straight up into the sky, and it flies itself. There are no controls to fight with. You climb into the capsule, tap a destination into a tablet, and let it do the rest. It will even fly off on its own to a charging station when it runs low, so nobody ever has to stand around babysitting it. Think about how that changes the whole day. You drive the base across town like any electric car, hit the wall of traffic that always forms at the same choke point. And instead of sitting in it, the capsule simply lifts off the base, clears the part that is jammed solid, and sets down on the far side while the wheeled half goes to charge itself. As one clean idea instead of a pile of compromises, it is one of the most convincing versions of personal flight anyone has shown yet. But GAC is not the only Chinese company that decided the sky was suddenly fair game. XPeng X3. XPeng's aviation arm built a flying car aimed at feeling almost boringly familiar. And that is the clever part. The X3 has vertical takeoff and landing baked in through an 8-rotor system. So it rises and drops straight up and down with no runway needed. On the road, it just drives, When it is time to fly, it shifts into flight mode, and you still steer it with a steering wheel and a gear lever. So leaving the ground doesn't demand a whole new set of instincts. It tops out around 130 kilometers an hour and stays airborne for roughly 35 minutes. And the ground half of the machine can recharge the flying half, so it spends less time waiting and more time actually useful. 2 passengers ride inside, and that steering wheel detail matters more than it looks. Every other flying machine on this list asks you to trust it completely or learn something brand new. The X3 hands you the same wheel you have gripped your whole life and quietly lets you take it into the air. The goal here is not just to prove that flight is possible, it is to make flight feel normal, and normal is exactly what turns a spectacle into a product a regular person can picture owning. Here is the part that should really get America's attention though. China is not doing any of this in an empty room, racing against nobody. The rest of the planet is flooring it in the exact same direction. And some of the fastest players are not Chinese at all. The rest of the field. The whole rest of the world is sprinting in the same direction, and every machine is another lane in the same race. France built a flying motorbike from Lazarus, an electric motorcycle that rides normally on the road right up until 4 kerosene jet turbines hidden in its wheel hubs tilt downward and blast it clean into the air. A limited run, roughly $500,000 statement of what is now physically possible for anyone with the money to prove it. Amazon's Zoox built a robo-taxi with no front and no back, a symmetrical pod that drives in either direction without ever needing to turn around, seats 4 passengers facing each other like a moving living room, and reads the world through a full wrap of LiDAR, cameras, and radar. And here is the tell in how serious this has gotten. Zoox is not selling the vehicle at all. It is building a ride service, betting that the future is not a car you own, but a car that simply arrives, which is a much bigger and stranger ambition than it first sounds. Japan brought some of the strangest ideas of all. There is a robot that trails you through a store carrying your groceries, then folds down into a small vehicle you climb onto and ride home, half servant, half taxi, blurring the line between a thing that helps you and a thing that carries you. And there is a self-balancing motorcycle that recognizes its own rider by sight, holds itself perfectly upright with no kickstand at all, and answers to gestures like something that is genuinely half alive, closer to a horse than a machine. And it is not only cars and bikes. Austria's Rosenbauer reinvented the fire truck as a low, sleek hybrid electric machine that can fight a blaze on pure electric power, killing the noise and the fumes at the exact moment a neighborhood needs clean air the most. When even the fire engine gets reinvented, you know the whole idea of what a vehicle is has come loose, which leaves the one question all of this has quietly been circling. The race between 2 countries. Who actually wins this? That is the question underneath every machine you just watched, and it does not have a comfortable answer. The contest between the United States and China over the next generation of transportation is really a stand-in for a much larger fight over technology, industry, and power, and both sides are pouring enormous resources into it. This is not really about who builds the coolest SUV or the wildest flying car. It is about who sets the standard the rest of the planet ends up buying, driving, and depending on for the next 50 years. China has become a global leader in electric vehicles, propped up by heavy government support and a massive home market that lets its companies scale at a speed almost nobody else can match. BYD, NIO, and Ehong are setting the benchmark for electric SUVs, drone taxis, and just about everything in between. Its whole play is affordability and scale, building efficient, low-cost machines meant to flood global markets and get the technology into as many hands as possible. And scale is a quiet kind of superpower, because once you can build millions of something, every version gets cheaper, and every lesson learned feeds the next batch faster. The world felt it slowly at first, in falling battery prices and cheaper parts, and then all at once in finished vehicles that simply undercut everything parked next to them. The United States is playing a different game. Home to Tesla and Rivian, it leads on raw performance and on self-driving software, feeding off the same Silicon Valley engine that powered so many earlier waves of technology. American strength tends to live at the premium end, in advanced capability and cutting-edge features, rather than in the cheapest possible product on the lot. And the fight runs underneath the vehicles too, down in the engines themselves. American automakers and aerospace firms are pushing next-generation electric motors, hydrogen fuel cells, and hybrid propulsion. General Motors is chasing better, cheaper electric motors. Boeing and SpaceX are developing engines built around sustainable aviation's fuel and reusable rocket propulsion. These are two completely different bets on the same future. One says the winner will be whoever can build the future cheaply enough that ordinary people can actually afford it at a scale measured in the tens of millions. The other says the winner will be whoever owns the hardest technology and the smartest software and can defend that lead while everyone else scrambles to copy it. Both bets have won before, in earlier industries and earlier decades. What is different now is that they are colliding head-on inside the same category at the same moment, which is exactly why every one of these unveilings suddenly carries so much weight. Now, picture that American engineer again, still parked at the monitor, the U8 footage looping on one screen and the SkyTrain gliding on another. That is the whole race in a single frozen frame. One country building the future cheap enough for everyone, the other building it powerful enough to lead. Both of them aimed at the exact same finish line at the exact same moment. The machines are already here, on the road, on the water, and in the sky. The only thing left undecided is who ends up setting the pace. So, if even one of these caught you completely off guard, do future you a favor and subscribe so you catch the next wave of this before everyone else does. And tell me down in the comments, which machine would you actually climb into first? The floating SUV, the driverless SkyTrain, or the flying car? I genuinely want to know where you land, and I might change mine.